Welcome, I'm Spiritbox. In this video we're reviewing the Revenant's new elite spec, the Vindicator. This new spec is a throwback to Cantha from Guild Wars 1, allowing us to summon the powers of the rivaling factions Kurziks and the Luxons. We will begin with an overview of the spec's new weapon, the utility skills, and the traits. I will then demonstrate some gameplay highlights. Following that, we will look at some of the common complaints, list pros and cons, and provide my feedback based on my personal experience. Please note, this review is purely intended for sPvP and does not reflect my opinions on PvE or WVW. Without further ado, let's jump right into it with the Vindicator's new weapon, the Greatsword. Looking at Greatsword Skill 1, we can see Revenant have yet again been cutting corners by copy-pasting auto-attack animations. Despite that, this is a solid auto-attack with half a second cast time, inflicting chill and vulnerability on the third consecutive hit. The second skill is Mist Unleashed. Big telegraph, decent range, and applies 5 stacks of vulnerability. Next we have Skill 3, a dash skill which applies 3 seconds of chill on hit. Skill 4 blocks attacks for 2 seconds and deals a counter attack based on how much damage you absorb. Skill 5 is basically Reaper's Gravedigger. Yeah, that's really just it. Oh, you can move around while casting the skill as well. Looking at the utility skills, this is where the spec offers its unique mechanic. I present to you flip skills. Each utility skill has a flip side. Once you activate it, it will go on cooldown and a new skill will appear. You can then activate that skill, or you can press Alliance Tactics, which will revert it back to the previous skill. The orange utility skills are offensive and the blue skills are defensive. This means the Vindicator essentially has access to 10 utility skills, which provides a lot of flexibility during gameplay. The heal skill on the offensive side of the bar is a channel that ticks damage, inflicts invulnerability, and generates might for each foe struck within the radius. With this you can easily gain big stacks of might. Next we have a ranged AoE skill dealing damage while granting quickness and endurance for each foe struck. This legend also has a mobility skill where you dash forward, dealing damage and gaining might for each foe struck. Worried about being chain CC'd into oblivion while you try and secure a kill? Fear not. The Vindicator's got you with a stun break and stability. Wow, Revenant would stab? The Luxon Elite skill is a slow-moving projectile with 2000 range and underwhelming amount of damage, which also inflicts 5 stacks of torment. You can also activate it facing away from your target, which may be used to deceive them during a team fight. On the Kurzik side of the utility bar, the heal is an AoE channel for 1.5 seconds. Tree Song is a Condi cleansed AoE ranged skill that generates endurance. Battle Dance is a half-second backwards evade that grants resistance and regen to nearby allies. Awakening is yet another stun break, offering stability and protection. Finally, we have the Urn of Saint Victor, which is a throwback to Guild Wars 1 ritualist gameplay, which personally I was very excited to see. This is a support heal skill that behaves much like a Herald's Facet. However, at this stage I'm disappointed with this skill overall. Not only does it require 12 pips of upkeep, it also prevents all healing on you, deals damage to you periodically, and it takes 2 whole seconds to reactivate. At this point you're prone to interruption, so you could potentially be locked onto it. It's basically a suicide button that ArenaNet were kind enough to offer you should you come across games like these. Oh, right, I'm gonna help you out. Hold on, buddy. Come right now. Right, get ready for this. Moving on to the traits, let's begin with the dodge replacement mechanic. Firstly, we have Death Drop, a long activation dodge which is capable of dealing big damage, but is also easy to avoid due to its long build-up time. Imperial Impact deals less damage and inflicts chill, but is quicker to land than Death Drop. Lastly, Sage's Shield has an even quicker activation time, but instead of dealing damage, it heals and provides a barrier. It also requires much less endurance, so you can activate it more frequently. Looking at the minor traits, we have Tenacious Ruin, which replaces the typical 2 meter dodge bar with a single bar of endurance, much like the Mirage. Now, as I said before, not all dodge variants are built equal. Some cost more endurance than others. Balance in Discord provides a nice bit of sustain. Empire Divided provides additional power while above 50% HP and additional healing power while below 50 HP. Moving on to the major traits, the first one adds a CD reset to Alliance utility skills on the F12, but increases its CD duration. At this stage, it feels irrelevant to PvP since Alliance utility skills have an energy cost in addition to a CD, so it doesn't feel useful at all. Not to mention the downside is a massive 20 CD duration on top. Amnesty of Xingji is the trait I use in this video. Your F12 and utility skills now grant regen and might upon activation. For some reason, the Luxon skills, which are thematically offensive, grant regen, and the Kurzik skills grant might, when I feel like it should be the other way around. Next, we have a support theme trait on a long 90-second cooldown that heals nearby allies and removes conditions. Reaver's Curse grants endurance for each target affected by your dodge. Anxian's Trust grants AoE endurance on F12 and legend swaps. Next up, this is what I currently find most useful in PvP. Gained Vigor after dodging, and Vigor's effectiveness on you increases by 50%. So for the following gameplay highlights, I used these generic traits. Then we have Berserker Amulet for big deeps, and Rune of Divinity so we don't get one shot. So here we are in the team fights. I decide to apply pressure to the nearby Tempest. Before I can activate Mist Unleashed, they blink away, so I face traversal into them, finish them off with an auto attack. His teammate comes to the rescue. I decide to summon the Spear of Archimedes, only to be bitterly disappointed because that damage is just ridiculous. I'm not sure my opponent even felt that, to be honest. In this highlight, we battle the enemy Revenant, forcing them to retreat into base. They're pressured at this point, so they make as much use out of the Zuhelter dodge as possible to gain barrier and sustain themselves a bit longer before inevitably falling into down state. The victim's teammate joins in enthusiastically as he begins to unleash Greatsword 5. I follow that by using GS5 and Mist Unleashed, which apparently whiffs as he dodges everything. Doesn't matter, however, because I then swap weapon bars, land Sword 4 and connect with Sword 5 for a decent burst. He's able to ward off the attack by swapping to staff and going on the defense for a while. He does manage to land a decent taunt there, so I have to go all the way around, which slows me down a little bit. I try and support my teammate with a bit of heal. Someone teleports on top of me, but I teleport back to my main priority target and try and just get him down. Fighting for his life, we finally managed to down him, so I shift my focus to the Tempest, or rather the Catalyst. I then try and alleviate some pressure from my teammate to avoid him from getting down, but he does go down eventually. I'm then able to land a decent crit with GS3. Here I fail to dodge the enemy's Jade Winds. While I'm stunned, I switched legends and decided to drain his resources by fake casting Jade Winds. I tried to heal my ally a little bit before I realised downed opponent is actually just about to die, so we finish him off, and that wraps up that team fight. Next up, I was surprised to see how much damage my GS5 is actually capable of doing. That phase traversal into GS5 was absolutely lethal. Next I used Nomad's Advance to close the gap and finish him off with a couple of auto attacks. He goes down fairly easily. I then immediately target lock on the Blade Sword, face traversal on him. Use GS3 to close the gap, somehow hit him. I'm not sure how, but that's a very wide hitbox. Luckily the Blade Sword evades Spear of the Archimedes. Probably wouldn't have felt anything. He goes down eventually and we focus the Ranger. Here again I just use phase traversal to close the gap and finish him off. In this team fight I decide to focus on the opposing Vindicator, so he pops Battle Dance, evading backwards, and I tail him by using Sword 5, but I miss as he flies up into the heavens. I know he's running out of resources, so I chase him down looking for the kill, so I wait out his block and down him with GS5. Now, being my first match on Vindicator, I do not know the optimal opening combo, but it's precisely at this point where I'm thinking some CC would really be helpful right now. However, as you know, the Vindicator has 0 CC options, so my opponent is able to safely res his teammate and they get back up and continue the fight. So at this point the Blade Sword is on half HP and I just continue to chase him down. The following is a trick I like to use with Sword 4. Just LOS behind an obstacle and unleash the full cast on the unsuspecting opponent. Oftentimes this trick works because they won't see the animation hidden behind the obstacle. So he lands a stun on me, I break stun with Reaver's Rage, miss my skill shot and finish him off with decent range from GS5. In this duel I'm fighting a Catalyst, so I'm going in not knowing any of their skills. I open up with Eternity's Requiem, shaving off half their HP. He evades Mist Unleashed, I cast Sword 4 but I get dazed immediately. I go back in with Sword 5 but Magnetic Aura stops me. I pre-cast Sword 4 and do a quick 180 to land it. I then wait for his invulnerability to wear off and prepare to land the quickness skill, but fail as usual. Here I cast Spear of Archimedes and continue to pressure the opponent. Now remember how I mentioned that this ulti hits like a wet noodle? Yeah, that just happened. Next duel against the Blade Sword, I get an axe thrown in my face, so I decide to punish him with Sword 5, which he fails to dodge. Use phase reversal to deliver unblockable attacks. I attempt Sword 4 but he's able to interrupt that with Pulse Charge. Jump on him with Sword 3. I then swap to GS, cast 4 anticipating an attack. Swap to Shiro for the stun and deliver some auto attacks, but he stun breaks. I'm a bit low on HP, but I continue to counter attack. At this point he's running around waiting for his bull charge to reset. He's able to land Bull's charge and immediately goes for the second stun. He gets it, but the long aftercast on his animation prevents him from capitalizing on the opportunity and pressuring me further. Here I tried to stun him, but I timed it wrong. He re-engages with Bull's charge, but I blocked that with GS4. He swaps out of shield, so this is my opportunity to finish him off, pre-cast sword 4 and go in with sword 5, job done. To conclude, let's look at the pros and cons of the Vindicator from a PvP player's point of view. The utility skills offer flexibility, allowing you to play a more defensive or offensive style depending on the situation. The Greatsword feels like a solid weapon, offering reasonable AoE damage, mobility and block skills. It doesn't feel overpowered and its animations feel smooth and polished. The dodge mechanic is interesting and offers a different, new style of play. Of the 3 dodges, however, the third one is by far the better choice, due to its cheap endurance cost, healing and barrier. It's also a new, unique way of supporting allies and healing them, and I'm all for it. From an aesthetic point of view, the theme of the famous Kurzik and Luxon factions is a great choice for the Revenant's new elite spec, though to be fair I'm biased as I grew up playing factions in Nightfall. On to the cons. Having access to 10 utility skills on the Alliance Legend is a plus, but the flip skills mechanic feels awkward to use. Sometimes you're locked into using some skills which take away from the flexibility of the profession. Also, when you swap out of the legend, the skills will remain as they were. So when you swap back to the Alliance Legend, the utility skills you've previously used won't show up. Additionally, the F2 mechanic is largely unimpactful and is mostly used to refill endurance. In addition, improvements need to be made to the animations. The aftercast animation on the new dodge is far too long. There is a brief window of time after the dodge is complete that you are animation locked, making you vulnerable to attacks. This is a huge disadvantage in PvP where being locked into an animation could spell disaster. I've had a few situations where I've been killed because I was locked onto its animation aftercast. This applies to all 3 dodge variants. Moving on to the elite skills, I found myself rarely using Spear of Archimedes. There were times when I was able to get devastating crits with it, but most of the time it just hit for around 1200 damage. It seems like it's useful as an engaging tool due to its 2000 units of distance. However, because there are so many obstacles in all PvP maps, the slow moving projectile usually gets obstructed. At the moment, due to its energy cost and long cast duration, I found myself almost never needing to use it, and when I did use it, it felt like I could have spent my energy using an actually impactful skill. Now, where to begin with the Urn of St. Victor? I mean, it's a skill that I did press as a panic button a few times when stun locked, and every time I did, I came off worse than I went in. Using this skill literally feels like a suicide button. You have to give it to ArenaNet though. It's quite literally the worst elite skill I've ever seen in any MMO. If I was to come up with a video for the worst ever elite skills in the history of MMOs, surely this would be on top of that list. Finally, the traits are very lackluster both for PvP and PvE in its current stage. There really only seems to be 2 viable traits at the moment. The other options are nowhere near as interesting or powerful. I really dislike the design of Redemptor's Sermon as a trait, as it looks like lazy design. So to just go over briefly suggestions and recommendations, I've seen lots of great suggestions on Reddit threads, official forum threads and YouTube videos already, and I'm gonna reiterate them here. So the F2 skill should feel more impactful and have more of a purpose. My suggestion is to make it so that you can press F2 to swap between the Kurzik and the Luxon skills, so you're not forced into a certain playstyle if you don't want. The option is there should you need it. The aftercasts on a lot of skills need to be fine-tuned to improve fluidity, most notably in the dodge animations. I would even suggest reducing the duration of the Grandmaster trait Forerunner of Death, as 2.5 seconds of duration feels too long. Lastly, Vindicator desperately needs some form of CC for this profession to be viable in PvP. My suggestion is to add a knockback to the Spear of Archimedes, which would make that skill see a lot more play. In addition, I would remove the self-damaging ticks from St. Victor and add an AoE knockback upon activation, similar to Ventari's Elite. That's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for the next one.